quiet life, one that worked. It was a Thursday evening in Savannah, Georgia, the kind of humid dusk where the cicadas hum and time seems to stall. I had just set out the almond cookies I'd baked the night before. 2 teacups waited on the table, steam curling from their rims. It was 7 p.m. Richard's time. Every evening my husband of 15 years walked through that door like clockwork. Same calm smile, same cologne, always with a story from work and a kiss on the cheek. But that night he didn't come home. That night I stared at the front door long after the tea went cold. By 10 p.m. I got the call. Heart attack, massive and sudden. He died in his car outside his office. The words didn't make sense. Not to me. Not to someone who just folded his dress shirts that morning and laid out the salmon he liked. The funeral came fast, too fast. Men in black suits, women in neat dresses, condolences I couldn't remember accepting. And in the blur, one moment stood still when my younger sister Marissa walked in. Marissa always smelled like expensive perfume and bad decisions. Her hug was too long, her voice too sweet. And later that night, as she poured herself a drink in my kitchen, she said something that cracked something open in me. I know it's not the time, she began, swirling the ice in her glass, but Richard loaned me some money. I just thought now that you're taken care of, we could settle that. I blinked. What money? She smiled like I was being dramatic. I guess he never told you. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked through our house in silence, touching everything like it might answer me. The bookshelves, the china cabinet, the framed photo from our wedding that now looked like it belonged to strangers. And that's when I saw them. Richard's keys still sitting right where he always left them. Including the one I had never been allowed to touch. That key was different. Thicker. Brass, not silver. It had a little blue sticker on it, the kind you get from a hardware store when someone makes a copy. Years ago I'd asked Richard about it. Just my old workshop, he said with a smile. Tools, grease, nothing you'd want to see. And I believed him, because I always did. That was our marriage, warm, smooth, and full of spaces I had learned not to step into. But now, with the funeral over and questions multiplying in my chest like wildfire, I had nothing left to lose. The next morning I drove. The address was scribbled on a torn envelope I found in his glove box. Industrial Row, west side of Savannah, rusted metal buildings and cracked pavement, the kind of place you drive past but never look at. Richard came here every Thursday, same time, same route, like a ritual I never questioned. The metal garage door creaked as I unlocked it. The key turned stiffly, and for a moment, I just stood there, afraid of what I might find. Afraid it might be nothing. Afraid it might be everything. The air inside was stale motor oil and dust. I reached for the light switch. The fluorescent bulbs flickered, then buzzed to life. And my breath caught in my throat. This wasn't a workshop. It wasn't shelves of tools or car parts. It was something else. Every wall was covered top to bottom with photographs, printed emails, maps, receipts, handwritten notes. A college of obsession, or memory, or something in between. In almost every photo, there he was, Richard, but not the Richard the first knew. He looked younger, freer, worn jeans, flannel shirts, tousled hair. He smiled wider, laughed more openly, stood differently. And he wasn't alone. Beside him in almost every picture was a woman, maybe in her 40s. Dark hair, sharp eyes, the kind of presence that doesn't need words to be noticed. They were at the beach, a ski lodge, dinner by candlelight. In one photo, they were standing with a young man in his late 20s. The three of them smiling like a family. I turned over the photo, in Richard's handwriting. Lena and Nate. August 2024. I froze. That was the night I'd made his favorite pasta, and waited 2 hours for him to come home. And now I knew why he never showed up. I stood in the middle of that strange, silent room, surrounded by a version of my husband I never knew. My pulse throbbed in my ears. My hands trembled against the cold metal desk. Then I heard it, footsteps. Light, hesitant, like someone trying not to be heard. I turned sharply. Standing in the doorway was the young man from the photo. Dark hair, sharp jawline, eyes that looked far too much like Richard's. He stepped forward slowly, cautious but not afraid. "Elaine Murphy?" he asked. I didn't answer. "I thought you might come here," he said. "I'm Nathan Bell. Richard was my father." My knees went weak. I don't remember what I said. Maybe nothing. Maybe I just stared. I had the feeling that if I spoke, my voice would shatter into pieces too small to gather back up. Nathan moved closer, careful not to invade my space. He told me about you, he said. Not everything, but enough. That you were kind. That you were steady. I shook my head. How long have you known? My whole life, he said simply, but he didn't visit often. My mom Lena, she never pushed. She said she understood. But after she passed away last year, he came more, stayed longer. I lowered myself into the dusty chair behind the desk. She's gone? He nodded. Car accident. She was supposed to fly to Lisbon the next morning. She never made it out of town. The words hit me like gravel. I couldn't process any of it. Nathan reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He gave this to me 2 weeks before he died, he said. It's not official, just something he wanted me to keep in case. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. It was a draft of a will, not notarized, not even dated properly, but in Richard's unmistakable handwriting. It mentioned assets I'd never heard of, a company called Cypress South Holdings, an instruction to access a secured vault, and one final line. Access code, see personal item gifted to E. My heart stopped. He meant the sapphire necklace, the one he gave me 2 nights before he died. I hadn't worn it since. I'd tucked it back in the velvet box, too heavy for my chest. Now it felt heavier than ever. What is Cypress South Holdings? I asked, staring at the paper. One of his offshore firms, Nathan replied. He moved money through it. After Mom died, I started digging. Some of the accounts were in my name, ones I never opened. He paused. I think he was trying to secure something. For you, for me, for the baby. I looked up. What baby? Nathan hesitated. That's something I think you should hear from someone else. But I already knew. I already knew who he meant. 2 days later, I stood inside a sleek glass office that looked nothing like the man I thought I married. Nathan had used a keycard to get us in. He was listed as a co-owner. Something Richard had arranged years ago, under a different name. Everything about the building felt distant, cold, abstract paintings, chrome furniture. No photos, no warmth, no trace of me. The receptionist hadn't even blinked when we arrived. She was used to seeing Nathan. She had no idea who I was. At the far end of the room, behind the oversized desk, hung a large abstract canvas in muted grays and blues. Nathan walked over and tapped the frame gently. The safe's behind this, he said. I reached into my purse and pulled out the sapphire necklace. The clasp had always felt a little too complicated, like it served a hidden purpose. I twisted it counterclockwise. Click. A thin metal plate popped out from the back of the pendant, etched with a string of engraved numbers. Nathan took it and slid it into the keypad. Beep. A low mechanical whir. The panel swung open. Inside the hidden vault were stacks of documents, a sleek black flash drive, a small wooden box, and a single silver key with a tag. Bank deposit, Federal Reserve Trust. Nathan reached for the documents first. Corporate transfers, offshore records, legal agreements I couldn't begin to understand. These aren't just accounts, he muttered. These are shell companies. Look, registered in the Caymans, Luxembourg, Singapore. I picked up the flash drive but didn't plug it in. Not yet. Something told me whatever was on it couldn't be unseen. Instead, I opened the wooden box. Inside was a gold ring, simple, elegant, not mine. Inside the band, engraved in tiny cursive letters, L always. L for Lena. I stared at the ring in silence. The room felt too still. The air too thin. Nathan stepped away politely, giving me space. I could feel his discomfort, his pain mirrored my own. Richard had bought her a ring. Maybe he even proposed, or maybe he meant to. I would never know. That realization cut deeper than any document ever could. All this time I thought I knew the man who shared my bed, my mornings, my favorite coffee creamer. But here, surrounded by sealed envelopes and silent machines, I realized something I hadn't let myself admit until now. He loved her. Not just as a passing affection, not as a secret fling, but in the way that left permanent marks, in the way that built worlds. Maybe he loved me too in a quieter, more controlled way. But Lena got the real version of him. And I got the performance. That was the moment the morning stopped. And something sharper began to rise in its place. I didn't go home. I couldn't, not yet. Not while every room in that house echoed with lies spoken over dinner. Instead, I drove to Marissa's condo. She lived in one of those polished developments on the north side of town. Coated gates, valet trash, wine tastings on Thursdays. Strange, considering she'd always complained about being broke. She answered the door barefoot, wearing silk pajamas and a glass of Chardonnay. Her makeup was flawless. Her eyes too calm. "Well, if it isn't my grieving sister," she said, stepping aside. "Come to inspect the widow's inheritance." I didn't answer. I walked past her and into the living room. That's when I saw the photo. Framed, prominent, smiling faces. Richard and Marissa clinking champagne glasses at what looked like a fancy party. The date in the corner, December 2019. 5 years ago. "What the hell is this?" I asked. Marissa took a sip of her wine. "Oh, that? Company holiday party. You were too tired to go, remember? Richard insisted I keep him company." She said it so casually, like it was normal for a sister to stand in for a wife. "We always got along so well," she added. "You know that." I turned to face her, my voice flat. "How well, exactly?" She froze just for a moment. "I know about Lena," I said. "About Nathan. About the offshore companies. About the ring." Her lips twitched, then smoothed again. She walked over to the liquor cart, poured herself another glass, and said softly, "Fine. You want the truth?" She placed her hand on her stomach. "I'm pregnant," she said. The world stopped moving. 10 weeks. I found out the week before he died. Richard knew. He said he'd take care of everything. He told me he was finally leaving her Lena. I stared at her. "So you were still seeing him, even after Lena died?" She nodded, unapologetic. She was never supposed to last. I was the one who stayed. I stepped back, nausea rising in my throat. "You slept with my husband." She shrugged. "Don't act surprised. You had your perfect little life, your neat dinners at 7, your matching towels. I was the mess, the screw-up. Then Richard started showing up, listening, helping. You were his routine, I was his escape." The slap came before I realized I'd raised my hand. Her glass shattered on the floor. She didn't flinch. She just smiled. "Now there's the real Elaine," she whispered. "Not the picture-perfect wife. The woman who just realized she's been living a lie." I turned away, my hands shaking. "I'm going to honor the part of Richard's will that protects that baby," I said. "Not for you. For the child. They didn't ask for this mess." Marissa's expression flickered. "You mean that?" "I don't know what I mean," I said. "But I know this: I need to leave." And I did. Because staying would have meant sinking. I didn't go home that night. I went to Claire's. Claire had been my best friend since we were 19. She knew when to speak, when to stay quiet, and when to just make tea. That night, the sapphire necklace sat on her coffee table like it had something to say. I stared at it, then at the black flash drive in my palm. It felt like a weight I couldn't name. We didn't open it right away. Not that night, not the next morning. It took me 2 days. 2 days of feeling like a ghost in my own skin. 2 days of looking over my shoulder, half expecting more truth to come crashing through the window. Then one morning, Claire poured tea into 2 chipped mugs. Nathan sat quietly on the other side of the room, and I clicked the mouse. The flash drive opened. Inside was one folder, labeled, "For Elaine." One file, a video, dated 10 days before Richard died. I hesitated. Then I pressed play. The screen flickered. And there he was. Richard, but not the version I remembered, not crisp and composed, not charming. He looked hollow, sleepless, defeated. He leaned forward. "Elaine," he said, "if you're watching this, I'm gone, or I ran out of time." He rubbed his face. His voice was dry, cracked. "There's no good way to say this, so I'll just say it. You were never the one I needed to hide things from. You were the one I tried to protect, but I waited too long." He looked down, then back up. "There's someone you need to be careful with. Someone you trust more than you should." My stomach tightened. He looked straight into the camera. "It's Marissa." The room went still. She wasn't just a mistake. She planned this. All of it. The money, the pregnancy, even what happened to Lena. He paused, eyes brimming. I think she killed her. He couldn't prove it, he said. But the timing, Lena's sudden crash the night before flying out of the country, was too convenient. The brakes had failed, but Lena had just had the car serviced. No witnesses, no signs of foul play. And Marissa already knew she was pregnant. Richard leaned back, exhausted. I've made backups, records, leverage. You'll know what to do. Then the screen cut to black. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Because now I had a decision to make. One that would define everything that came next. The next morning, I didn't wait. I met with Marcus Doyle, the attorney who handled my father's estate years ago. He was practical, discreet, and allergic to drama. Exactly what I needed. I brought everything. The documents, the photographs, the second will, and the flash drive. I didn't tell him about Marissa, not yet. Some truth still needed to breathe in private. Marcus scanned through the files in silence. When he finished, he leaned back, eyes steady. Do you want to press charges? He asked. No, I said. I want insurance. He nodded once. Then we create backups. 3 of them, digital and physical, 1 here, 1 with you, and 1 with someone who can't be traced back to either of us. Claire stepped forward. I'll take the 3rd. For hours we scanned, sorted, indexed. Richard had been meticulous, almost compulsive. Wire logs, fake invoices, email chains, international transfers that crossed so many borders they stopped making sense. This wasn't just shady business. It was organized, strategic, a criminal enterprise wrapped in polished suits and Thursday dinners. By the end of the day, Marcus drafted a simple letter. No threats, no demands, just a polite legal reminder addressed to Richard's former business associate, Gordon Blake. At the bottom, I signed my name. Then I added 1 final line in ink, in my own handwriting. Try me, E.M. We sent it by courier. Blake called within 15 minutes. You think you're clever, he growled through the phone. You're in way over your head. No, I said calmly, you are. Because the next call I make is to the IRS, and then to Interpol. Silence. Then laughter. All right, he said. What do you want? Nothing, I replied. Except this: you stop. No calls, no threats, no midnight warnings. You disappear. Because if you don't. I paused. Every document we have goes public. Every transfer, every name, every deal. He exhaled. You don't want that kind of trouble. I already have that kind of trouble, I said. The difference is I'm not afraid of it anymore. He hung up. 2 hours later, Victor Crane called. His voice was smoother, more polished. But I didn't care. Because they knew now. I wasn't bluffing. And I wasn't the woman they thought I was. That evening we sat on Claire's porch, Nathan, Claire, and me. The flash drive was back in its case. A printed copy of the folder was buried inside a planter box beneath Claire's favorite hydrangea. Paranoid, maybe. But after everything I'd learned, paranoia felt like common sense. Nathan sat beside me, quiet. My mom used to say Dad was complicated, he said softly. I thought she meant sad. Now I think she meant dangerous. He was both, I replied, and probably more. Above us the stars blinked quietly, steady, indifferent. The next morning I made one final stop. I invited Marissa to brunch. She showed up in a pale blue dress that hugged her growing belly. She smiled like someone who still thought she held all the cards. I'm glad you reached out, she said, folding her napkin. I was afraid you were angry. Why would I be angry? I asked gently. Because you slept with my husband? Because you're having his child? Or because you lied to me for years? Her smile faltered. I placed the flash drive on the table. I know about the accounts, the manipulation, the promises he made to Lena. I know he was planning to leave you. She didn't blink. You can't prove anything, she said. You're right, I replied. I don't have to. I stood up. Because I'm not going to court. I'm not going to drag this through the system. I'm not going to spend one more second trying to fix what can't be undone. She stood too. You think walking away makes you stronger? No, I said, but it makes me free. Then I left her there, blinking under the soft light of the porch, Let her sit with the silence. Let her wonder. Later that afternoon, I returned to Marcus's office. I handed him the flash drive, a signed affidavit, and one instruction. If anything happens to me, you send it to the press. All of IT. Then I went home, packed a single suitcase, walked through every room I'd once called mine, ran my fingers across the doorframes, closed the garage door for the last time. 1 week later, I boarded a plane to Colorado. A new lease, a quiet cottage, a simpler name. No more vaults, no more lies, just wind in the trees, fresh air, and a woman who finally chose herself. My name is Elaine Murphy. And I'm not the woman who was lied to anymore.